Okay, let's go. Got it.
We
Okay.
got it right. So, just to introduce myself, I am the arm wrestling artist.
Yes, you are.
Cool. Well, this is Travis Graham, who I discovered on YouTube, like I have discovered so many people, and he is a natural bodybuilder, whatever,
I would say well,
weight
like a
trainer.
natural strength athlete. My main thing, I'm going through phases right now, but my main thing has always been powerlifting. And then to a degree, yes, like the physique component just comes with that as long
Yeah.
as your diet doesn't totally suck and you really take advantage of these natural hacks and everything. And then, as you know, recently I'm getting into arm wrestling.
Which is good when we're going to talk about your matches, and we're also going to talk about PEDs and,
Yeah.
a lot of questions around the use of them and the possibility of not using them. You're talking about, can you be strong in your 40s without PEDs and stuff like that? And I'm 45, so I'm also at an age where you're like, ah. So we'll
Yeah.
just talk a little bit. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just going to agree with you there because yeah, that's a lot of my things and a lot of my clients are yeah, like guys sort of my age. It's sort of like the best clients because it's what I am, so I know what their struggles are and
Yeah.
like their questions and just to be and I always tell people I go, I can get you to like where I am because I've done it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And but if you want to be like a pro bodybuilder or something like that, where obviously in that sport, PEDs are necessary to compete at the top level. But on the other hand, there's also natural bodybuilding contests too. No, they don't look nearly as monstrous or anything like that. But yes, there's a place for natural strength sports in this world, 100%.
Yeah. And I've been reading a lot of comments on arm wrestling forums. They also make me think there's quite a lot of people that would like to see more natural arm wrestlers too, because they quickly say, but they're just juiced to the hilt or whatever.
Yes.
It just muddies the water a bit. Where is their expertise coming from? And but on the other hand, I've listened to, for example, John Brzenk talking about that perhaps this bulk can be detrimental to your performance on the table.
PEDs are all about blowing up those muscle bellies and getting a little extra water and a little bit extra strength. I don't know if that makes a whole hell of a lot of difference, and sometimes I feel like it's a negative, right? I mean, you got guys that aren't on anything that can arm wrestle over and over and over again and don't ever seem to get blown up and have great endurance, and they take a few little things to try to boost themselves up, and all of a sudden it's like being on a high dose of creatine, and they one match and they're like pillow boys and numbed up and they can't arm wrestle anymore. So I don't know what the the perfect formula is. I'm not sure anybody does. Well, obviously some people think that other people have figured it out, but I don't.
So it's quite interesting just to talk
Yeah.
about this with somebody who knows more than me about this. So that's those two things I would actually like to just hear about Saturday, because that is your first proper competition. Is that right? Or
Yes, that's right. So, I mean, what a first competition. I mean, the standard was set pretty high because it's I guess the East versus West it's like an event, right? There was
yeah,
like live bands and music and you're drinking beers too. And it was in Toronto, there's this place called the El Macombo. If you watch the video, you saw, but it's a famous place where the Rolling Stones have played, David Bowie, all sorts of things. Great venue. But yeah, that was my first one, and I won my first two, and then I lost mine. So
Yeah, but actually the fact that you won any is actually pretty impressive, because anyone who's entering that sort of thing will have a standard that's relatively formidable.
There's amateur division and then pro division, and I went in the amateurs.
Yeah, of
Okay,
course,
so that
of
was,
course.
but still, yeah. I mean, I've only been really training for like a few months, I guess I would say. So I was very pleased with
Yeah.
that.
But what surprised me was the last guy you pulled against, the one that you got slaughtered by. He just looked like a schoolboy. How did that feel?
They were calling him the baby face killer. And I'm
Yeah.
like, yeah, right,
Totally.
because he's like pretty young, and then yeah, he just he got good hand position on me, and it's basically what I did to the first guy, he did to me.
Yeah. So the reason, maybe it's interesting for me also to know what it is that brought you into arm wrestling. What did you discover? And I'll just start with my story. Was that I was starting to do climbing, bouldering. And
Yeah.
then there's a guy called Magnus Midtbø. Don't know if you've heard of him, a Norwegian climber who has a YouTube channel, and he had Devin Larratt on as a guest.
Oh wow, I
And
didn't
I
know.
was like, no. And I was like, okay, who's this guy? He's got charisma, that's for sure. And so I followed Devin Larratt into the sweaty field of arm wrestling, and watched him. And then I discovered Schoolboy. So I tried to follow Schoolboy, and then I discovered John Brzenk. And
Yes.
the video that I saw with John, he was, he's wearing glasses, a sort of baggy dad shirt, as I call it, and a little bit grey and a big grin on his face. And he was beating all the young guys at this after pool. And this was during his retirement, so he really was not looking very big. And I was like, what the heck? So I Googled his strange name and found his match with Denis Aplenkov. And,
Yes.
what the heck? I was just looking at it and I was like, this is wrong. The little guy is beating the big guy. And
Yeah.
I love contrasts. I love contrasts. John just has that reputation as being the monster slayer, giant killer.
Yeah.
And that was on display there. I couldn't believe what I saw. In fact, I almost didn't want it to be true at first. It just didn't compute in my mind. But then I ended up getting hooked on John Brzenk, and I've written a rap about it actually, so that can be found on my YouTube channel.
You're kidding me. You do a lot of cool stuff.
I just think he's such a contrast to his world, and he's probably created. I think he's probably been instrumental in creating arm wrestling as this place where it's actually cool to be gentle somehow. I mean, I think he has a lot more influence on this combat sport than he's maybe aware of, and even has tried to have. And I just find that fascinating.
Yeah, you hear him speak, and he's very soft spoken. And the movie Over the Top with
Yeah.
Sylvester Stallone. Devin Larratt said that was based on John Brzenk's life, in part.
At the end of the video, you can see him pumping the air, and then you're like, okay, that arm is actually pretty defined and developed. Don't know if you noticed that.
Yes, but he doesn't flaunt it though, right?
No, he's just like a kind of unique character, and that's partly why I want to do this biographical portrait of him. So I hope at some point I can, but it really requires communication directly with him, because I don't want to paint him as I see him or as the community see him, but how with his influence, at least on how he is portrayed. Anyway, we're getting a little bit off track.
Let's get back.
So let me hear what is it that brought you to arm wrestling, and then we'll get onto the stuff about PEDs.
I think it just sort of came up in my YouTube feed randomly, and this was during COVID. A couple of years ago, that I got into like watching it. Again, I wasn't training for it, like I said, not till recently, but it was through COVID. And then like the big guy was Canadian. It was Devin Larratt. So that's always, we're not really known as a huge athletic or strength country. We have a few guys, but yeah, when I saw that sort of stoked me. And like you said, Devin Larratt definitely has like a personality, so he brought it up. And and it got me back into it because I used to arm wrestle with my grandfather, and I think everyone used to arm wrestle at some point. And it was just so, especially if you watch the wall matches, right, the WAL matches, and they were at a time, and again, this was COVID, so like you're not allowed to go to the bars and all this stuff. And there's these matches, and they were at the bars, and it was a party, and there was such freedom around the event that I was like, man, this is everything I want to do right now. You know what I mean? And if I were to think of arm wrestling, it would be like this. So I went into the WAL YouTube channel and just started watching a ton of that. And then I was like, I wonder if I bought a table, if anyone would do it. So I bought a table for the gym, and then a few people just started fooling around. And we were just fooling around. Didn't know any of the martial art moves of the hand or anything like that. And then it's like anything. I'm like, I wonder if I can go and actually test myself and see just how I do. So it's like anyone who maybe starts in a gym and they're working out. So they're doing squats, bench press, and deadlift just to work out. You're like, oh, you want to test your strength? Well, enter a powerlifting meet. So we were arm wrestling, and then we were also doing a lot of strict curl stuff. Now I was like, I wonder how strong my arm is. So then I entered this East versus West qualifier. It came up, and but that's how it was. Is I was at home watching a lot of YouTube, and I went down the YouTube, and it just came up, and that's how I got it. Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe we get to the questions that I sent you about PED use. So it's been something that you've made maybe part of your calling, if you like, to just encourage people to trust their own natural strengths and use natural means to get stronger. So do you want to tell me just the background to this choice?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm 46 now, and coming up, if someone's on PEDs, we just used to call them steroids back then because that's just what you called them, right? Someone was on steroids, it was like a big thing, like, oh, that guy's on steroids or that guy's juicing or whatever. So most people weren't. And nowadays it's, and especially with social media and everything, and it's just so widely accepted, and that even Larry Wheels was, telling people exactly what they take, and people are like, here's my stack, here's what I take, and it's just sort of so accepted. But the reason I never went down that route is primarily I was a big nature boy. I was a big nature boy, so like spend time in nature, outside in that. And I also was became a holistic lifestyle coach. And my teacher was a guy named Paul Chek, and of the Chek Institute. And he was just sort of, maybe he was pretty jacked, actually. He's probably about 5'8", 180 pounds, and lean. And he could lift, there's a picture of him lifting a 180-pound dumbbell over his head, like with one arm. And like, he's all about being natural, and it's all like, he taught me that if you can harness the power of nature, then you will not need steroids, unless your ego is such that you want to surpass the natural ceiling. But it's like, for most people, if you can harness the power, and he had 6 fundamental principles. If you can harness the power of nutrition, hydration, sleep, exercise, and stress management. I've narrowed it down to 5. And really harness that, then you will have energy, a physique, performance in whatever you want. Mine's strength, but it could be anything. And you will be more than happy with it. So that's sort of that's what I encourage to do. I'm not by any means like a PED expert or anything, because actually I research the natural stuff, right? And I've had friends growing up that did go on steroids. A couple of them did have pretty serious complications, and when they would come off, they would say, I've had some friends that have done some drugs over the years. I was never one of them. I don't know why. I just steered away. But they're like, out of all the drugs I did, that was the most addicting, for sure, because it's something you walk around with, right? You walk around and it's your identity. When you stop, it's like they said, it's like I lost my identity. So it was really hard to get off.
Is the identity connected to the actual physical shape that you are during on cycle, or what?
Yeah, it's like, well, yeah, they walk around, and we're young men at this point too, right? So if you're in your like 20s, or even your 30s, and like you got a point to prove, or maybe that because they were just delinquents, because we were just young and stupid. But you want to walk around, you want to be the biggest guy at the bar, you want to impress the chicks, whatever it is. So when they would get off of it and they would lose that, they would feel like they weren't adequate. They weren't, again, they identified with that persona. And that's when I saw this, I'm like, well, that's something I never really want to lose. Right. And then it just goes to show you it wasn't really them. And I understand that, like, when you're on PEDs and steroids, you still put in the hard work. I get that, like, you work just as hard and everything, but it was just never something that I call it strongevity. I wanted strongevity. I wanted to be strong and built for a long time and not reliant on anything else. It's another one of my quests is to be self-reliant in this world. Which is why I tried doing my own maintenance on my vehicle, but that backfired today. But having strongevity is such a free thing, because you don't need anything, and you can do it. You can do it if you know how to do those 5 foundational principles that I was talking about: nutrition, hydration, sleep, movement. I call it movement, it's exercise, and stress management. If you can get those, then you can do it. And hard ass work, good work ethic.
You did say earlier that you're not an expert on PEDs. You're kind of more of an expert on natural strength, and that is a pretty important point. Is that I want to hear more the positives of being natural rather than the negatives of being on steroids. That's pretty good angle, actually. So, but my first question was, can PEDs benefit without hurting your health?
Well, with PEDs, what you have to understand is that all of them, and like the most common ones that are being taken, whether it's like Anavar, Anadrol, Winstrol, like whatever, is that they're all growth factors, and that all tissues have receptors to growth factors. So this is why you'll see things like the enlargement of the heart, arterial walls thickening, thickening of the blood, even all sorts of things, right? Because things just get bigger and more sturdy, because everything has receptors to these things. So can you do them without being hurt? It's like anything. And again, this is just to my knowledge of it. But the larger the doses, the more frequent the doses are, it's just the more damage it does. I know some people that have done it under doctor supervision. This is typically called being TRT now, or testosterone replacement therapy. All that really is a low dose of steroids, because there's one called testosterone cypionate. And there's another one that's very similar to that. I just can't remember it off the tip of my tongue right now. But that's when I was a bouncer. That's what all the other guys were taking as a steroid, taking larger doses of it. But yeah, things start to happen with that are not desirable, and it's and even the physique. And some people say you can see even in Devin Larratt now, his head is expanding, and things are starting to look weird. Do that. So, is there a safe way to do it? And I suppose but like, what's your idea of safe? Because there's other things too, like the tendons don't necessarily respond as well as the muscle tissue does. So a ton of like musculotendinous junction injuries in these guys. Like Larry Wheels had it, and then I saw the video of him training a guy, and like the pec tears off. I know this is a very simple answer, but it's just like, the more you do, the more you're at risk for all of those things. But like I said, it's addictive.
Yeah, that's where we came from. That's right. I just wanted to point out, John Brzenk also talked about the fact that if you just go like throw a whole bunch of PEDs in your face, and you haven't actually built up your tendon strength and your bone strength over a good long period of time, you will, quote unquote, break your shit. And that's what you're saying. Yeah. So it's not a quick fix. But as you're talking about this whole idea that it's addictive, sometimes, and I agree with you that there seems to have become such an accept of this, as if, look at them juicing, look at them getting bigger, and this is fun, this is great. But actually, if you've been looking at some of the stuff I've done in my art, one of the projects I've been working on is about drugs and addiction, and it's a really dark place to end up. And if steroids and PEDs are addictive, there's going to be a shadow around it. Even if you don't die from it, there can be other issues. I mean, I say that looking at the likes of Larry Wheels and Hermes and what's his name, Levan, they all seem to be so nice and happy and exude such a good atmosphere around them. So I've wondered what you have to say about that as well, just this the negatives and the positives.
Yeah, like look at cocaine. Cocaine is a hell of a drug, and you feel great when you're on it, right? Temporarily, it raises your mood. It elevates you to a good place. But same thing, frequency and the amount of dosage you're doing. It's gonna have a negative feedback loop, right? It's gonna start to catch up with you and do that thing. So it's like, can you achieve these states without even going down that road?
Yeah.
People need to ask that question more often.
Yeah.
Rather than just going like, okay, if I take this PED, I know I'm going to get to this place, or it's really highly likely, because it's such a potent thing, that it's a drug, right? So it's very potent, that I'm going to get there. But it's and that's human, is instant gratification. It's one of our detriments, I think, as human beings. And patience is all but lost in today's world, in this fast-paced world. So again, just to get to the back to your question, can you do it safely in today's world? I don't want to say yes. Part of me doesn't say no, because yes, obviously you look at people, they're doing it, they can get off it and stuff like that, but it's all like under doctor supervision. But I don't even want to entertain really like a real answer, but I'm just gonna say no, just to give you an answer. Yeah. Because I think for the everyday person that's watching this, they're not gonna have doctor supervision when they do this. And there's so much more that you should explore naturally first.
Yeah. It's funny, when I think back to me as a child, looking at adults and drinking coffee and tea, I saw an addictive nature that I didn't want to be a part of. So even to this day, I don't drink coffee, and I only drink herbal tea and very occasionally black tea. But there was something, I didn't know what it was, but there was something there that I didn't want to be a part of. So, addiction and craving and needing something outside of myself was evident to me even as a child. And I didn't want to be a part of it.
That's a pretty big observation for a child. Really. Because, yeah, I mean, I can attest to that. I am a coffee drinker, and it's habitual. Whether it's doing as much damage to my system as if I was doing a cycle of steroids all the time, I don't know, but definitely we all have like little addictions, but yeah, how big those addictions are and how detrimental, how really reliant are you on those is, that's another story.
Yeah. So, let me get this opened up. Yeah, so you mentioned TRT, and so with arm wrestling, right up until perhaps the Natties, PEDs weren't really part of the game. So, it was Nattie against Nattie, big Natties against small Natties. John Brzenk again, great guy, was able to beat some of the day monsters like Cleve Dean, which is insane. I mean, the size of that guy. Like, wow.
450 pounds or something crazy like Cleve Dean. Insane.
He was more than that. I think he was 600 pounds. So the difference was maybe 400 pounds.
Crazy, crazy.
Just insane. So, but then turn of the century, in steps the likes of Alvora and Denis Saplenkov. I think Denis Saplenkov's nickname was Syringe. my guess, because what's his name? Taras Ivakin was just talking about the past, and he mentioned and then in walked Syringe, and then we all started to lose or something. So I think it had to kind of be Denis. But regardless, yeah, somebody was obviously using a syringe. And then, when John competed against Syringe, John was maybe on androgel by that time, which is, like something that you put on your skin. So it must have been a very light testosterone thing. So, and he has said, I don't believe it actually gave me more strength, but it gave me more motivation and belief that I could still do this. And if you're watching Pulling John, he does seem kind of deflated, John. He doesn't seem to have the energy to do this. So it can be more the motivation that it increases. But your thoughts on that?
Well, testosterone does a lot of things, and it interacts with a lot of systems. And one of the systems it interacts with is the energy system, right? Just like your alertness and everything like that. So yeah, when like a small dose like that, whether it makes you actually stronger, and it depends on how low your testosterone is to begin with too, and how much of an effect this is going to have. But it's, for like that example that you gave with John, it's more like, yeah, maybe not necessarily stronger, but it gives you the motivation to use the strength that you were already harnessing, right? But that's one of the things with testosterone. It's sort of like a get up and go. I want to say it's like drinking a coffee or something, but motivation and determination is one of the effects that testosterone has on both men and women, right? Increasing sex drive too, like libido, right? It just basically, like, testosterone basically says, like, kill something or screw something, right? Or like get something done, right? So yeah, so that's TRT though, but it's sort of the same thing in terms of should you take it, and this will be my next YouTube video, is should you take TRT? And spoiler alert, it's going to be me walking through all the protocols that you should do first if you're not doing them. And this is if you watch Andrew Huberman or any of these big YouTubers, same thing. They're like, if you're not eating like grass-fed beef and you're not sleeping well and you're drinking low quality water, etc., you are actively suppressing your natural testosterone production. That you're actively doing that. Those are all the things. Like if you're doing all those bad things, you should not have high testosterone because it's physiological. You're physiologically suppressing it. So you got to make corrections first. Then if things don't work out, then maybe there's a place for it, but use it as a Kickstarter. Make a time. I'm going to be on for 3 months, and I'm going to see if I can really hone in on these 5 foundational principles and create habits while I have the energy to do it. Because it sort of gives you the energy to do the right things, right? And then you can wean yourself off with some. Sometimes they'll wean people off with Clomid or another drug, but sometimes you can just lower the dosage and come off. But as far as TRT goes, if that was the question, I'm not sure, but
is a good answer, and actually leads me to a follow-up question about both TRT and stronger PEDs. Is that, as far as I have understood, that if you're on them long enough, you actually will have to continue to use them because your body stops producing its own testosterone and becomes reliant on the chemicals that you add to your body. And also that's partly because the body has a limit to how much it can have or accept. So it's like, oh my goodness, what's going on? I'm going to have to stop my own production because this is just way too much. So once you've made the decision, if you do it for a certain length of time, is that right? That then your body's like, I don't need to be here.
Yeah, correct. So Dorian Yates, who's a 6-time Mr. Olympia, he's a big proponent of telling people like not to do steroids unless it's like you're willing to sacrifice everything, because now his balls don't work. His balls are broken, essentially.
Yeah.
So he doesn't do it. He doesn't have any testosterone in his system. So he's ruined his natural testosterone production. Now you can do that too through TRT. Like when you start taking TRT, your balls don't work either, because your body has a regulating mechanism. So it starts in the hypothalamus, and the hypothalamus sends gonadotropin releasing hormone to the pituitary, and then the pituitary sends luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone to the testes, and then the testes produce testosterone, and then the hypothalamus monitors how much testosterone is in the system, and then it basically tells the testes to either keep producing or cool it for now. But essentially, that's a sort of a long-winded answer to what you said, but that's sort of a scientific explanation of why your natural testosterone production stops. Even when you do low doses of even TRT, right? Because the dosage given is a physiological dose, meaning it's a dose that like that I probably have in my system right now, right? And that's all it wants. So that's why when there's an abuse of these anabolics or steroids, that's why it's hard on the liver as well, because it has to get rid of so much extra. So yeah, so your balls don't work, whether it's TRT or full-on steroid abuse.
Something to think about. I remember Ryan Bowen was talking about that he was trying for another kid, so he was on something from the doctors, but was not on the normal sort of all the PEDs that he was on for a while. He was just taking something from the doctor to help try and get his testicles to work again.
Yeah, because you're in the Leydig cells of the testicles, they'll produce both testosterone and sperm. So if you're shutting off that mechanism, if you're shutting off the luteinizing hormone and the follicle stimulating hormone, then they're not going to get either of that stimulus to produce sperm. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
and yes, if you do it for long enough and you come off of it, they could be like permanently shut down. Yes.
yeah, it's actually made me think a little bit about people who are on, for example, heroin. I don't know if this is true, but if you have been on heroin or other really strong drugs and you try and stop using them, will you just permanently feel low or down? I mean, I'm saying on one hand, my friend who stimulated or inspired me to do this whole exhibition about addiction, he just didn't seem to be able to let go, while another guy who was total cocaine addict, he is 5 or 6 years clean and is doing well. So it's maybe different because they don't replace they replace maybe the happy hormone, the happy feelings. I don't know.
The dopamine. And like I said, my friends went through that, right? They go through like a little bit of depression. Because I'm just getting messages that my battery's running low. And like I said, with everything that happens to me today, I don't have my cable. So if I die, we'll definitely pick this up soon.
Okay. How many minutes have you got? Because then we'll just try and be a bit faster.
I got 10%.
10%. Are there natural, effective alternatives to TRT and hormone replacements for older athletes and, I suppose, younger athletes? What foods help increase testosterone, estrogen naturally? I suppose you could take it as one question and fire away.
100%. Yes. Number one, I think everyone, well, first of all, you start with the basics. So you start with eating food that is not sprayed with neurotoxins and endocrine disruptors. We commonly refer to these as herbicides and pesticides. So if you know what a pesticide is, it kills the bug. How does it kill a bug? Well, it's actually a type of nerve gas. So it kills the nervous system of the bug, so then they all die, or it disrupts their reproductive cycle so that they don't reproduce more. Right? Now, of course, the thing is, in doses that are so low, it's not going to affect human beings. But not true. Over time, you do anything enough, it does have an effect on you. So you start eating organic food, number one. That's the first thing, right? Or a farmer, it doesn't have to be certified organic. It should be if you're in a grocery store, but if you know your local farmer and you know that they don't use that stuff, do that. Animal products should always be free range and not necessarily free run, like especially if you're doing chicken. Free run chicken just means that they're still in a barn and they're not outside, but they're just not in cages. You want animals that are outside, grazing, eating their natural things. So free range animal and free range animal products. And that would be like my staple, right? And as far as vegetables, I did a podcast or a clip a while ago about vegetables that are good for testosterone levels. These are any like cruciferous vegetables like Brussels sprouts, broccoli, cauliflower, leeks, these sort of things that are good. And the ones that you want to stay away from, of course, is things like soy. That's the big one. Stay away from because they have xenoestrogens in them. So soy has properties that when you ingest it, it acts like an estrogen to the body. And it's with men and women is the thing is that there's an over feminization. Now you still need a certain amount of estrogen in your system, even for healthy strong males and healthy strong females. You still need that. But it's the over estrogenization of society that's really causing a lot of these problems, and the inability for men and women to not express themselves in their full physical strength capacity is those things that I just mentioned.
Interesting. I mean, we women seem to have to make do with, this is just my impression, with estrogen and accept that we don't get so much of the testosterone. And so it sounds a bit strange if women also have to keep away from estrogen. I mean, I keep away from soy because of the estrogen that it kind of produces. Or
And like I said, it's more of the over feminization of it, or over estrogenization. So if you, like I said, you still need levels. You should maybe get your levels checked. But if you're high, then you want to avoid those things for sure. You want to avoid soy.
And my channel, I have about 96% or 98% male viewers and 2% women. But I am a woman, so maybe it's interesting to also just talk about women in their 40s, and you know that you're facing. I don't know if you know so much about this because it's not your area as such, but facing menopause and the fact that kind of is going to take away some of your estrogen production, and therefore you may lose some of the strength that also helps with, or endurance or whatever. Do you know any sort of thoughts?
It's not really my forte.
I know.
Comment too much on that, so I'll leave that one.
Leave that one. Just because you mentioned the estrogen, I thought I might just throw it in there. Fair enough.
Thing, like sometimes, like when women get on hormone replacement therapy to replace that, it's because it's really like what hormones you need to understand is that they like to operate in a balance of each other.
Yeah.
Right. So it's if you're low in that, then it can affect your testosterone levels as well.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's something called amortization where the body can take testosterone and convert it to estrogen if it's low in estrogen. So that's going to knock down your testosterone levels too. So definitely something to think about.
Yeah, I've heard that beer, for example, can turn your testosterone into estrogen. So
yeah, so that's through the hops, and the hops have aromatase. Aromatase, that's the enzyme that converts the testosterone to estrogen. So yeah, and which sucks because I really like IPAs, which are like hoppy beers. So I just need to take those lightly.
Yeah, gotta cut down on the old beer.
That's it.
I actually hardly drink any alcohol either. It doesn't interest me enough, thankfully. So, but I mean, occasionally I'll have a little something to drink, but very, very little, very rarely. So I'm a lightweight, which makes it easy for.
It does.
I was going to say for me too, it's an easy night out, but I don't even want to get drunk. So
actually, no, I'm beyond that too.
Yeah, it's just not interesting really. Right, so we're running out of time again. We've got about another 8 minutes, and you might have less on your thing there. So can wait. Yeah, so Derek, I don't know if you noticed, Derek Smith, he was talking about maybe there being a weight cap, partly so people could be healthier. They're arm wrestling, because it's like everything's just getting bigger, heavier. It's just like massiveness, and it's maybe fun to watch these monsters on the table. I only find it interesting to watch a monster be beat, to be honest.
Yes,
like
yes.
When John beat Saplenko, that was fun to watch. But yeah, so he was asking, what's the future? What, just like bigger and fatter, and could there be a weight cap? And interesting enough, the weight cap that he suggested was 350 pounds, which was his current weight. And he's like, is he 6 foot? 6'8", I think. He's really big, and he's talking about a weight cap.
I got 30 seconds. I'm sorry.
Okay. Okay, well, thanks for we'll keep that for later, and I'll see what I can do with what we have. Away we go. So before we were rudely interrupted by the computer dying with our last interview. attempt.
Yeah.
We were talking about weight caps because Derek Smith had suggested a weight cap. Your thoughts?
Yeah. So weight caps, they can be hard to implement, especially in strength sports. A better thing would be, they're doing some work over there. Let me know if that bothers you. I think a better approach would be to introduce an intermediary weight class. So right now, once you're over 250 some odd pounds, you're in the unlimited, what's called the unlimited class, right? Mm-hmm. So you could be whatever. So introducing another weight class that would be called the super heavyweights that goes up to 350, right? So the 250 to 350, and then anything above that would be called the unlimited class. But I think that super heavyweight class would be really competitive, right? Mm-hmm. That would be more my approach to it, just looking at powerlifting and how they do things. There's very few human beings in the world that could really ever get like beyond, I would say, like 350 pounds, right? Unless they're, again, like clinically obese. But even if they're strength athletes, which aren't renowned for having the best physiques or anything like that. But I like your idea and Derek Smith's idea of either doing like either the weight cap at 350, or I think so it wouldn't piss off too many people. It would be having another category, like the super heavyweight category. And again, I think that would bring a lot of guys back into competitive placings and make that category really competitive. And it would not incentivize guys who are like maybe naturally 300 pounds to try to get as big as they possibly can, because they're going to be in the unlimited class.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. So
yeah. I think, and Derek's concern was also about your health. I mean, if you just keep having to get bigger and bigger in order to have a chance against the other person who decides to get really big, most likely by PED use, then it's gonna get out of control.
Well, that's it. It becomes a battle of chemicals, of steroids, rather than because the bigger you are, actually, if you can lock yourself into your own body weight and just, I mean, that's what a lot of arm wrestling is, right? It's body weight. You feel like Jerry Cataret's, like just all upper body, and he gets that hook and presses it, right? Or if you lean back, like it's body weight's a huge thing. It isn't just rotator cuff strength or just arm strength. Your arm has to be locked and be able to hold your own body weight. Yeah. So if you've been Devin Larratt or Gennady or like a few people, and when I started doing this, you'll hold a dumbbell over a bench and you hold it there, and then you just lean forward over it, and then you lean back. You don't actually do this. Mm-hmm. And then you're seeing how much of an isometric contraction you can do.
Basically. And that an isometric contraction is the locking,
is having it flexed in one position. Mm-hmm. And that's it. Now this would be called an isodynamic because I'm holding it in one position. Mm-hmm. And then the dynamic or the movement part comes from me tilting my body and changing the gravitational pull, but not extending and flexing.
I go to a club that is part of Antidoping Denmark, and in my club is a guy called Tony Christensen, whose nickname when he was competitive was the Lone Star, and he was very, or is still very against doping and the use of PEDs, and you can see in his when I've heard him talk about it, which I might actually include in this clip here. Here talking about. So this is a natural muscle. That's natural.
That's natural. Yes. Fair.
Yes.
That's natural.
Pure natural. You want to see something?
Yeah.
That is the truth.
There we go.
Doping is cheating.
So Copenhagen power pullers, you'll only see natural arm wrestlers here.
Yes.
And I'm just thinking, you know, it's really hard for athletes to have to choose between being part of what would be called maybe an amateur league, or more or less not get any recognition for the strength that they've built up, because the focus is on the untested league, you know.
Yes.
So I was even thinking, you know, what are the chances that one could have a drugs tested and untested competition side by side in the same, for example, with East versus West, because I'm pretty sure Engen is pro Nattie. I can't obviously decide for him, but
Yeah. I've never heard Engen talk on any of that, but to answer your question, that I know can happen, because it does happen in other strength sports. So there's
Okay.
again, and I always come back to powerlifting because I've got experience with that. But so there's one league, and it's a single league, but it has two divisions, and they
Okay.
call it the tested division and the untested division. So because they started to realize that some people are just going to do it, right? Some people are just going to do it. So the untested, you sort of know that the people that are going over towards that one, they're using, right?
Mhm.
And then in the untested, the tested division, yeah, you get tested, and yeah, it's so it's two different things, but it's under the same league. It's either called the CPL, like the Canadian Powerlifting League, or I can't remember. It's a different one than I'm competing in right now. The one I'm competing in is the CPU, or the IPF, which is it's all tested, right?
Mhm.
But yes, it can absolutely, and that's a good idea.
Yeah, because I was just thinking, you know, East versus West is taking off, and it's a good competition, and Engen is opening up for all sorts of unknown people to compete in it, because he wants the best of all weight categories to have a chance to prove themselves. And hats off for that.
Yeah,
And I just think, you know, even under the same evening of competition, where you don't need to make a big thing out of it, but just have some athletes that have chosen to be tested, and there will obviously be some that would prefer not to be tested, and just let it happen, and it can be in the small type or whatever.
Yep, and see how it goes. And because, like I said, there's that in powerlifting, and it just came to mind that it's also in bodybuilding. So they have the natural Mr. Olympia, and they have the natural test too. And I think that it's going to pick up. I think it already has. It's almost like what powerlifting did when we used to wear like super suits and everything. And when I got into powerlifting, so you'd wear this crazy suit, knee wraps, all this equipment that you would wear that would make you lift a lot more weight, right? They were super tight suits. But then people started getting away from that and going back to more what's called raw lifting, where you're just using just a weight belt and some snug knee sleeves, but nothing crazy. And that has totally come back and taken over the sport.
And why did it stop? Why did people feel like this was maybe not the way to go? Did they feel it was a kind of cheating?
Yes,
snug.
absolutely. You can see these when I have my old powerlifting gear, but when I put on a press shirt, my arms, like at rest, my arms are out to here. They're being held up. So you need a certain amount of weight to even get the bar to your chest. I needed like at least 200 pounds just to get the bar to the chest, and then you press it up. So
that's cheating.
It got out of control. People are like, screw this. And then like when I'm done, like I'd have like cuts here because the stuff is made out of like thick Kevlar. Like it feels like it'd be cut, and it would be like, oh, ridiculous.
Yeah, I believe with arm wrestling you're not allowed to have a sleeve on. I don't know if that's
Yeah. No, you're not, because the ref needs to see things, right? So
needs to see things, yeah. Oh yeah, I was wanting to talk about gray zones, because now you were talking about there's some fruits and vegetables that can help increase testosterone or whatever, help you increase your chances of building muscle. And I can see how people think, well, you know, if I take 100 carrots or whatever it is now, carrots is not one of the ones you suggested, but then I will increase my levels. So why not, you know, instead of having to eat all these carrots, I should use the one you mentioned, but whatever. Then
vegetables, but yeah, like green surface vegetables. But anyways, finish your thought. Then you
my
can use
thought.
carrots.
So then I could just replace it with this simple pill, which is doing the same thing as all these carrots, and I'll save money on all the carrots, or be able to eat things that I prefer to eat. So you can end up with this this gray zone that's maybe a slippery slide from seeing how you can increase testosterone in a natural way and replace it by something more straightforward in an unnatural way.
Yes. So, but like my thoughts on that?
Yeah, your thoughts on that. And I have 10 minutes before we have to reboot.
That's okay. So my thoughts on that is just what type of person are you? Are you an easy way out type of person? And with carrots, we'll just use carrots. There's always going to be carrots. So you're not reliant on some sort of foreign substance that isn't, you know, if it runs out or that company shuts down or whatever, like, what are you going to do? One of the things, and like my brand being called the Natural Alpha is, and I'm trying to do this more too, is learn to be more self-reliant.
Yeah. I don't know why I just laughed. I was just thinking of the carrots could be in your logo. Anyway, carry on.
Yeah, right. But and when you're more self-reliant, you can, it's just going out to what's there. And truly, and I said before earlier in the interview that I'm sort of a nature boy, and I've sort of grew up to harness the power of nature and all of these things and believe in it. So I was very much, I have that in my psyche, whereas other people might not be really in tune with nature, and I think that they would gravitate towards it, and they don't know the power that you can harness from it, right? So being more self-reliant, growing your own food. If you can't grow it, go to a local farmer who can, and eliminating all that stuff. When it gets into testosterone and estrogen and balancing your hormones and optimizing hormones too, if you take away the triggers, a lot of people don't think about taking away the triggers. So triggers would be things that are highly estrogenic, and I mentioned this before, this was the pesticides, the herbicides, all those things. Take those out of your diet and let your physiology regulate itself, because we're not, if you're not giving that even a chance, I mean, what do you expect? So that's one of the things is taking that out, getting good sleep so that your testosterone and your growth hormone has those giant spikes at night like they're supposed to. So again, there's I got those 5 foundational principles that I was talking about. I know I sound like a broken record, but actually, well, yeah, but they're sort of umbrella terms. There's details to them, but I won't bore you with them. People could, you can go to my very first podcast, or I think it's my very first YouTube video too, right? And I talk about, like, just do this, right? But yeah, it's nutrition, hydration, sleep, exercise, and stress management. But like, those are just the titles. Like, how you do that varies between, that might be a whole separate show that we can do, but
yeah.
But again, I'll just say, I'll cover nutrition very basically. Like I said, it's getting those triggers out of the way. So getting organic as much as possible, free range meats as much as possible. And if you're going to have vegetables, have those cruciferous green vegetables that have the anti-estrogenic effects, and balance yourself out, right? And then when you do that, your stress levels go down too, because anytime you ingest something that your body doesn't know how to handle, it raises your cortisol level as well and throws your blood sugar off. And then you're stressed, and then your energy is low. And then you go hunting for ice cream and potato chips because your body's trying to it wants the quickest thing to rebalance the blood sugar because it thinks it's a blood sugar crash, and you're stressed, and that's stress eating. And then it's a cycle
Oh.
I could go on, right?
Woo! Good
Right,
stuff.
but and then that leads to, again, shitty sleep. So then you don't get your testosterone and growth hormone, and then you're even more tired, and you want to reach again just for a pill because you just don't have the fortitude, the mental fortitude to do it. Like you've been robbed of your naturally given, right to feel a certain way. But a lot of people don't really believe in choices that much. They think if something's on the shelf, then it's okay to buy because my government said it's okay. Like, you know what I mean? And it's like, dude, you gotta now give me your address because I want to live whatever planet you're living on. But
actually, to do with the pills on the shelf, there's also a tendency in arm wrestling to take painkillers to even before a match in order to not feel or not hear the signals the body's telling. And that, what were your thoughts on what you could do about pain management that's more healthy?
Infrared sauna. Infrared saunas are great for helping inflammation complete the inflammation cycle. Inflammation isn't necessarily a bad thing. So if you have like micro tears in your muscles or your tendons or anything, a little bit of inflammation, good. And then it's supposed to complete the cycle, making you stronger, right? So when you get stuck in an inflammation cycle though, right? Was it? What? Oh,
I can hear some kind of boring.
Oh yeah, they're changing tires over there.
Oh, okay.
Work going on the farm.
Right. So so inflammation cycle is good. I've wondered about this because there's been such a tendency to put ice on inflamed areas, and I was thinking the body's actually a very intelligently created thing, and perhaps there's a reason for these inflammation stages.
Yes, of course, and it's again, it's more when you're just stuck in the middle and it's not healing, right? So that's chronic. It's called chronic inflammation. Whenever something happens for a long time, so there's acute inflammation, there's like full complete inflammation. Like just think if you like the most common example I give is if I actually just sort of cut my skin, it would get red, be inflamed, and then it would go down and it would heal. Great. If I just did like a light cut, right? So that happens on the inside of our bodies, but a lot of times it gets stuck in the red puffy part, and it doesn't complete the cycle. And again, it's because we're having inflammatory agents come into our body, right? That holds it there.
Okay. What are these inflammatory agents?
So the most common ones are what we call the 4 white devils. Okay. The 4 white devils are white flour, white pasteurized dairy. Okay. So like white milk, white sugar, and white salt. So a salt that doesn't have like a grayish or a purplish hue to it. So if you have like a Himalayan salt or a Celtic sea salt, you'll see it's like gray or purpley, and that's because it has all the minerals still attached to the salt molecule too. It's more of a whole food. But anytime you take anything and you have those things in isolation, right, and it's just pure white, it's void of any nutrition, right?
Okay.
And it creates inflammation in the body, right? Like my sister's a good example, chronic inflammation. She loves going and getting her morning croissants all the time. And she knows it, right? She knows it. God bless her, right? But I'm her baby brother. So, even though I know she says, I know you know your stuff, but I got to hear it from someone else. So I'm like, okay. Yeah. You were talking about them taking like things like aspirin preemptively, like before the match, so that they wouldn't.
Ibuprofen, yeah.
While they're pulling, yeah. Again, it's a common practice with anything, especially like high intensity strength sports, right? It's a preemptive thing that you do, especially if perhaps you're a little older and your joints are worn down a little bit, and you haven't been doing the 5 fundamental principles of maintaining a healthy body, like for sure, right? So there's a great book, and anyone who's watching should read something called Nutrition and Physical Degeneration by Weston A. Price. It totally quantifies the physical degenerative state of the human being in today's world, and totally links it to nutritional practices. There's more to say on that book, but I'll just quickly sum it up by saying it was written in the 1930s, and this was a very good time to do a study like this. So he went around the world to all the continents, and this is where there were still tribes living off of the land on their native diets, and also the same people, so relatively the same genotype, were also introduced to those 4 white devils that I was talking about. And within
those are black fingers.
I started the barbecue. While we were on break, I started the barbecue, so I got it going, right? And
4 white devils.
Yes, I know, right? I'm doing a wood smoked brisket, grass-fed, grass-finished, right? But yes, and within 1 generation, he saw, it doesn't matter what continent he went to either, within 1 generation, especially their facial physical structure started to change, but all sorts of degenerative things that we know as degenerative disease now started to happen and escalate within that time period, within 1 generation. And the people that stuck with the native foods of the land didn't have any of it, and they had perfect teeth. They had perfect teeth, yeah, all sorts of stuff. But humans are screwed up physically, and we think it's just, oh, it's too bad that you have that, or like you have those genetics, or whatever. No. Genetics are not set in stone. They're like a piano keyboard. It depends on how you play them and which ones you choose to express through your actions, right? So this is called epigenetics, and this is really it sucks, and it is great at the same time. It sucks because now you know that you are not just the recipient of disease most of the time, right? So now you have that information, right? But it's great for the same reason. Now you have that information, and now you can make better choices. But you can't rely on just saying, "Oh, I've got this."
You have to take responsibility.
Yeah, sometimes you're going to be a little bit more predisposed to something, but you can totally avoid it completely if you just live naturally.
I have one response to that that's maybe a little pushback, and that is the tolerance thing. The body has a tendency to also be able to combat things if it's given time to learn to manage it. And my thought about that is that if you were somebody who never ingested sugar, for example, if you then suddenly did, it would be much more harmful to you than if you were tolerant towards it. Is that fair to say? So this idea of, you know, allowing certain things to be part of your everyday life so that you build up a tolerance to it means that you could better manage it, or what?
Correct. Yep, I would agree with that. If you're eating sugar and you're doing it for a little bit at a time for a long period of time, and you adapt to it. Was that what you were saying?
Sort of thing, yeah. And because it's so... Sorry?
And it would have less of an impact as if you went your whole life without it, and then all of a sudden you started to take it.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So in our field, we do call that an adaptation, but we call it a maladaptation, meaning you're adapting to something that is lessening you, for lack of a better term, right?
Okay.
So instead of, you're adapting to a lower level of physical existence. And yeah, well, yeah, I can be brutally honest at times, but but that's what it does. It's a maladaptation. So yes, you get used to it. It's like someone living with pain, right? If I had a painful leg and I was limping and I just sort of adapted to that limp, I adapted to the pain by limping. Well, now that's taken me down. Yes, I'm adapted, but I'm not adapted to a better spot. I'm adapted to a lower spot.
Mm-hmm.
And that happens nutritionally too. So you get adapted to sugar. That means, okay, you're okay with your energy levels, your physical strength, and that at least the mental and spiritual capacities as well, right? In my opinion, but yes, you can adapt, but adaptation is not always a good thing. Is my point.
Okay. Fair enough. And then I had a question about stem cells. They're kind of coming into arm wrestling, and people are getting stem cells. And I mean, Devin was quite amusing with it because he's like, you know, I'm getting addicted to stem cells. You know, I need to join a group and saying, my name is Devin Larrett, and I'm addicted.
Yeah,
you saw that?
Yeah, it was a good one.
It was funny. But what are your thoughts on stem cells?
As far as I can tell, they're still relatively harmless and beneficial. This might be one of those medical breakthroughs that I can jump on board with. Yeah, stem cells, they help create new healthy cells. And I think I'm not really aware of any real consequences or side effects of it, other than become addicted to it, like Devin, right? Or if you just think I can just keep trashing my body and I'll just keep going and getting stem cells, I don't think that research has been done yet, like a long-term thing on an individual taking stem cells.
Yeah, taking stem cells. Yeah.
Right? But as far as I can tell, I'm not really against that.
Yeah. My only concern to start with was if it was ethically sound because of the issues with whether it was baby fetuses, you know, but people have been saying, well, actually it's more the umbilical cord that it's coming from, which is somewhat more acceptable to me.
Yes.
But yeah, I think it's not necessarily a health thing that can be the problem. It can be more to do with whether you start to just rely on, oh yeah, I'll just go and get some more stem cells for that, and you mentally are less willing to do the hard work and take care of yourself because you have that to fall back on. I think that's where the problem can arise.
Yeah, it's like anything that comes in a needle or a pill that can make it happen like that, as opposed to going through. It doesn't even become like what I'm like. Look at me right now, Leah. Does it look like I'm working hard? You know what I mean? It's just a lifestyle. I make sure I get enough adequate sunlight, but I enjoy it. I cook my meat over an open fire, but I enjoy it. Yeah, it's a little bit harder. It takes more time, I guess, but it's time well enjoyed. Right? But that's a mindset. I wouldn't say it's necessarily harder work, but it is maybe a little bit more time consuming. And same thing. And I mentioned it before, humans are wired for instant gratification, and we got to get over that. You just have to mentally get over that and enjoy the ride, smell the roses, all that stuff that you were told. Like, make it a reality, not just a cliche.
Nice.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's kind of the end of the questions I had for this particular podcast, or whatever it's called. I have one last comment, which is rather amusing. One of the posts that I made advertising our conversation, somebody's like, about you, is like, Nattie with that neck, and then they had three laughing faces. So
well, I saw that, and I saw your response, and you're like, yes, with that neck. Dude. So to that guy or person, I say, start doing heavy deadlifts.
You will get some nice traps, nice trap development, and a good neck. Yes. Yes, believe it or not. Yes, believe it
was
or not,
funny.
it's that.
And on that note, actually, I've noticed that in arm wrestling, in the chat, you know, there's anyone who seems to do quite well at something automatically gets, you know, their success is given to PEDs, and that's why it'd be nice to get a bit more of a clear line so that those who really are natty get the credit for it, rather than
That's right.
it being passed on to the drugs.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
On that note, catch you later.
Okay, Leah. Thanks again. This was awesome.
It was.
Okay.
Bye for now.
Okay, ciao. Bye.
Bye.